Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with Hilary Greene, Executive Director of the American Red Cross, Cape Islands and Southeast Massachusetts chapter, and Brendan O'Byrne, who is one of the heroes being honored at the Red Cross's annual Hero Breakfast here on Cape Cod. He is a former U.S. Army sergeant and former team leader with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, which served in Afghanistan. Welcome to the show to you both.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks for having me on.
Hilary, let's start with you explaining what the Red Cross does, because you do so much here on Cape Cod and many people might not realize that.
Yes, thank you so much. I love telling stories about the Red Cross because almost every time I speak, people go, I didn't know that. For example, recently there was that Bourne Bridge tanker rollover that happened in the middle of the night. And, in fact, I got one of the calls at 12:30. Red Cross volunteers head out to a situation like that and help the first responders because they are there for hours and hours. So that we have coffee, we have drinks, we have food, and if it runs for much longer, we head out and get them lunch. So we support the first responders. In addition to when there's a fire and there are victims of the fire, we make sure they have a safe place to stay, clothing, because people run out of the building without any clothes in their hands. If they need medications, we take care of their immediate needs. And again, those are all volunteers we have throughout the Cape Islands and Southeast Mass. The other thing people might not realize is we have a whole program called Service to Armed Forces. And one of the things we do, even in this modern technology era, is emergency messaging. So if you have a family member in the military and something good or bad happens, birth of a child or death of a loved one, you go through the Red Cross to contact your military member and also the commander of their squadron or whatever to get them home. And Brendan was telling me he even got a couple of emergency messages, one good, one bad. And then locally, people are always telling me, I didn't know the Red Cross did that, but that's something we put them through our Service to Armed Forces call center and make sure that they get contacted and they get home to be with their family. Of course, we do the first aid and CPR courses right at our chapter house in Hyannis. We have blood drives throughout the Cape. And we also do preparedness presentations. We have 2 AmeriCorps members who serve in our chapter house every year, and they spend time going to preschools, doing fire safety puppet shows, to senior centers doing senior preparedness. For example, the blizzards, when shelters open and people have to go to a shelter, they need to know what to bring, especially senior citizens. If they have medications, how much medication should they bring? If they have an aid of some sort, the aid should come with them. So we spend a lot of time educating people about disaster preparedness. And the big piece we're doing right now is fire safety. We're doing smoke alarm installations throughout our area, and nationally we're looking to cut deaths by fire by 50% in 5 years. So it's another big initiative of ours.
Being in the media, I know whenever there is some kind of big emergency, a fire or something like that, the Red Cross is always there to help the people, not just the first responders, but the people who are the victims of the fire or whatever the disaster might be. And I think that you help them with shelter and food and whatever temporary needs they have. Isn't that right?
Yes, yeah, and that's a big part of it because you don't realize until you've been in a fire that the firefighters do such a wonderful job. They save you, they get the fire out, and then they have to leave. That is their job. Is they make sure they call us, so we make sure we're there. But then we take care of them. You're standing on the street corner saying, "Oh my gosh, my house just burned down. What do I do? Where do I go?" And that's when the Red Cross is there.
And you have this annual Heroes Breakfast that we're talking about today, which is such a unique event. Tell me how this all got started.
Well, it just got started because there are heroes every day throughout our community and several Red Cross chapters. This is our 13th annual, so the first one was actually in 2003. And it's grown since then, and we recognize anybody who saved a life. I mean, that's an obvious thing. The Red Cross teaches CPR and life-saving techniques. But people had an impact on the community or served our community in an extraordinary way. And this year, in fact, is our centennial. Our chapter was founded in 1915 in Harwich, in the home of Miss Mary Ethel Young, with 19 ladies, and we have been serving Cape Cod ever since. So we're tying this year's heroes. There are 16 groups of heroes, 18 individuals, and we're naming their categories after important people in our history. So it's going to be a very special year. Every year is special. Every year people leave going, oh my gosh, I have to get CPR trained, or I'm just overwhelmed. I didn't know these people were in my community. They're not Red Cross heroes. They are local people doing amazing things, and we let them tell their stories.
And the interesting thing is that it was all women that started the chapter back then.
A lot of chapters were started in the Red Cross during World War I. So this is 1915, and it really was to help the military members at home. Clara Barton started it back in the 1800s, seeing how soldiers in the Civil War needed help after and during battle. So it really grew out of our service with the military.
And, of course, your featured guest this year, one of your heroes, is Brendan O'Byrne, who we have here today. And, Brendan, tell us your story, because you're featured in some works by Sebastian Junger, documentaries, and his new book, War.
I was stationed in the Korengal Valley in May of 2007, August 2008, with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. While I was there, Sebastian Junger came out to sort of report on our deployment there, and he came out for about 5 months with Tim Hetherington. Him and Tim both came out about 5 months, sometimes together, sometimes separately, and they documented my deployment, and out of that came Restrepo, Korengal, and the book War. And from that point, I got out of the military in December of 2008, and being a big part of the book War, I started getting people to ask me to speak about my experiences in combat. So at first it felt really hard to do that, and I started to tell my story. But the more I told my story, the more I realized it helped everyone to hear that story. So I kept just telling my story over and over again, and trying to help out other people coming home, other veterans coming home, and seeing that my story was helping them come home a little bit safer and easier.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal, and then we're talking about the Red Cross's annual Heroes Breakfast here on Cape Cod with Hilary Greene from the Red Cross and Brendan O'Byrne, who is one of the heroes being honored this year. And Brendan, what has all this attention been like for you?
It's always great to get recognition for telling my story. I've found that through my story, I've helped a lot of veterans deal with their own PTSD and their own struggles. So being recognized for that, for helping other veterans, and it feels really good. It's been great.
And I've noticed that on one of the websites with the documentary, your name is there for people to contact you if they did want to talk about PTSD.
Yeah, and I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of stuff on Facebook. People thanking me. People just wanting to talk about PTSD. People saying, "Hey, I have the same thing. That is the exact same thing that I'm going through. How did you deal with it?" And just having a voice out there that's really open and willing to talk about this stuff, because so many times you don't want to talk about the hardships that you're going through. You don't want to talk about you feel weak for saying that you have PTSD. So to have another voice out there, a person that, I went through a really bad deployment. It was a tough deployment. I'm by no means weak. And to see that I'm willing to say I have PTSD, and that doesn't make me any stronger, any weaker, I think is really good for other veterans to hear. And then sharing my story is really important to me. I share my story because I think that civilians need to hear my story. I know how to be a soldier, and I know how to be a civilian. Civilians only know how to be civilians. And I think there's lessons to be learned inside combat, and veterans we have to come home and share those stories, because if we don't share those stories, there's always going to be that gap between civilian and veteran. So being recognized for, telling that story and trying to bridge that gap, I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think that's something that brings us all together.
And when the documentary came out and you got to see Restrepo, and of course these journalists were sort of embedded with your group, and it was this harrowing deployment, as you said, what was that like for you, seeing that documentary?
When I first saw the documentary, it was with me and a group from my platoon and my company. Sebastian flew us all down there, and we got to watch Restrepo together. And it was pretty emotional, to say the least. But for me personally, it validated my story. When I got home, I would tell people my story, friends and family, and they would sort of look at me cross-eyed. And I'm sure that's what you went through. Everyone's had a really hard deployment. And I would say, no, seriously, I've been in a few hundred firefights. That this is really what happened to me. And so when Restrepo came out and the book War came out, it really validated my experience, and I was able to start to heal, really, from my experience.
It's an amazing story. And Hilary, who are some of the other honorees this year that will be at the Heroes Breakfast?
Well, we have 6 Life-Saving Hero Awards recipients, named after Lieutenant Colonel Ferris Posey, who is one of the executive directors of the chapter, but also the first one to start doing CPR and first aid training at our chapter. There's a great story about a little 7-year-old called Miles Roycroft and his grandmother Kathleen, who Miles noticed that his neighbor had collapsed and dropped to the ground, alerted his grandmother, and his grandmother, who is fortunately a trained emergency room nurse, revived the neighbor. But without Miles really being a big part of it, that neighbor was saved. And they will also be at the breakfast. We also are honoring, as our Miss Mary Ethel Young Community Impact Hero Award, is Dennis Police Chief Mike Whalen, who's retired now, and he was instrumental in starting the regional emergency planning shelters that happened for the blizzard. We opened 6 shelters, and he was a big part of that. And he was a very hard hero to get to be recognized. You should recognize the whole team, and we are. But he was instrumental in getting that done. And we also have a youth hero, Connor Barron, who has worked gathering items for veterans and people serving overseas. It's just so many great stories. I would take up your whole show telling all of them. But we've got 18 individuals being honored, and you will leave there inspired and amazed by the people that are right around you every day.
And what I always find when I attend this breakfast is you do hear these stories, and sometimes being in the media, we might have told a part of the story, and it comes and it goes, and you kind of don't think about it. And what this breakfast does is it tells you sort of the story behind the story often, the people who are really involved. And I think we have time for you to tell maybe 1 or 2 of those stories from the other heroes being honored.
Another one of our life-saving heroes is Mark Castiglione, who he was, before leaving for his 6-month deployment to Kuwait, he was an airman, and he and his family planned a vacation on Cape Cod and came across a terrible accident. And he pulled over, went in, and the vehicle caught on fire, and he still was pulling people out until emergency responders came. It's just amazing. And Major John Keel is another life-saving hero. Same type of story, just came upon an accident, went in, was trying to get, the man was pinned down, did first aid while trying to reach in. And it's just amazing these people do it, not because it's their job, but because there are people going by and could help.
And I guess something sort of kicks in, perhaps, in those situations, and you'd like to think everyone would do the same thing, but some people might not be able to, and sometimes people who really aren't in a situation to be able to do it, they do it anyway, and are able to save people.
And I do like to say that Red Cross training helps. If you are trained, really what you're trained to do is remain calm and call for help, but also be able to provide those intermediary services before emergency help comes. And it's a big commercial, really, for any type of life-saving training. it's amazing how useful it can be.
And you always do have a young person, or more than one oftentimes, who has, a situation that no one knows is going to happen, that this young person steps up. And do they often tell you that they have heard about what to do in an emergency from their parents or perhaps at school?
Yes, yeah. They their parents and schools, because we also go into schools and talk about preparedness. But it's funny because I always joke about the training is mostly you check on somebody and you say, call 911, but it's being with somebody. And so somebody like a little Miles Roycroft can know that something's happening. I need to go get help. And they know how to react. It's just amazing.
Sometimes, as you said, he's 7 years old, did you say? The children are so young, and you think that they might really not know how to react in that situation.
Or be scared, no, he went right into action, and his grandmother is so proud of him. She's like, just honor Miles. I said, no, we're going to honor both of you, but it's a great story.
And in the last minute or two that we have left, I wonder, Hilary, if you can give all the details of the breakfast for people who may be interested in attending.
Okay, that's great. It's Friday morning, April 10th, from 7:30 to 9, and it is at the Resort and Conference Center at Hyannis, the hotel right at the West End Rotary. Tickets are $50. A table of 10 is $500, and you can get tickets by calling our chapter house, 508-775-1540. We do usually sell out, so if you don't have your tickets yet, give us a call and make sure that there are tickets available to this wonderful event. And again, it starts at 7:30, doors open at 7. And you enjoy a breakfast and hear some great stories.
And unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Hilary Greene from the Red Cross, and Brendan O'Byrne, who is one of the heroes being honored at this year's Heroes Breakfast, for being here with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
And Brendan, again, thank you so much for your service. Your story is really an inspiration. I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.